This episode will discuss topics that some people might find disturbing, including the abuse of children. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Strange and Interesting Podcast, a show about folklore, the paranormal, urban legends, and pretty much anything else I happen to find strange or interesting. I am your host, Al. Today we will be looking at cults. It is an interesting topic to discuss because in modern society, the word tends to be thrown around and applied to anything and everything. The word hardly conjures up positive emotions and happy feelings. Perhaps the most common image people associate with a cult is that of a circle of robed figures chanting in an ancient language while getting ready to sacrifice a virgin under the light of the full moon. You might also picture a doomsday cult, a new religious movement, or a group of people who engage in unsavory practices. However, the word isn't always used in a negative way. One term you may have heard is cult classic. This term usually refers to movies, but can also describe books, television shows, and video games. A cult classic is defined as a piece of media that received negative feedback or little attention upon its initial release, but yet still managed to attract a passionate fan base. A good example of a cult classic film is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The movie was poorly received upon release, but over time, it gained popularity thanks to midnight screenings. I attended one of these screenings back in high school. I learned that there are people who will go to these showings several times a year and even dress up as one of the characters. These showings often begin with a spectacle called the Virgin Deflowering Ritual, which involves picking several members of the crowd who are there for the first time, in other words, virgins, and having them perform a raunchy act for the crowd. The example I saw was they had several men lined up on stage holding a banana between their legs, while a woman standing behind them had to put a condom over it. The movie is also interactive. During the film, the crowd will shout phrases at certain times to complement what is happening on the screen. As the late actor and musician Meat Loaf put it, this was because you could drive a truck through some of the gaps in the film's dialogue. Another example of the interactivity of the movie is when the audience fires squirt guns into the air when the two main characters are caught in the rain near the beginning of the film. And of course, there is dancing in the aisles during the Time Warp song. The word is also used in the term cult following. In this case, a cult is a group of people devoted to a product or brand. It can be a well-known brand, such as Apple Computers, or an obscure brand that never achieved mainstream popularity. It is also possible for a flawed product to receive a cult following as well. A photography professor I had in college told us about a group he belonged to called the Cult of Diana. In this case, the name Diana refers to a brand of camera introduced in the 1960s. These cameras were inexpensive, but known to have a variety of problems including light leaks, image distortion, and images not being centered. Despite these flaws, the camera gained popularity with some photographers for its ability to create surreal images. While I was writing the script for this episode, some of the articles I read compared social media influencers and multi-level marketing businesses to cults. I can certainly understand why multi-level marketing companies, or MLMs, can be lumped in with cults. MLMs are often led by a charismatic figurehead and offer a product that is pitched as being life-changing. Recruiters for MLMs often target people who are young or in desperate financial situations. They will fill the potential victim's mind with images of how wealthy they will become by selling the company's products and use appealing phrases like, set your own hours, work from home, and be your own boss. Sadly, most of the people who fall into the MLM trap make little to no money for their efforts and just end up further in debt. One of the reasons I can understand why these MLMs are lumped in with cults is because of an experience I had when I encountered an MLM in early 2000. I had graduated college a few months earlier and was looking for my first quote-unquote real job. And I answered an ad for a company called Equinox International to sell health supplements. So I went to their office, which was more like a semi-empty warehouse, and listened to the sales pitch. And one of the things I found interesting was the woman who was interviewing me encouraged me to buy one of their products just so I could see how good it was. They later invited me back for a meeting where they were watching a presentation by the founder of the organization, and he was giving a speech on this glitzy, glamorous-looking stage and talking about how God had other plans for him after he grew sick, but he discovered the power of these natural health supplements. Well, needless to say, I didn't get involved in this particular organization because one of the problems with it was the pay was only based on commission. So in theory, I could work my butt off and hardly get anything for my efforts. And looking back, I'm definitely glad that I didn't go with this company because they went out of business later in the year. Comedian John Oliver has an entertaining and enlightening video about multi-level marketing on his YouTube channel. I highly recommend watching it after you listen to this episode because we're not exactly going to be dealing with lighthearted subject matter from here on out. Cults themselves have been around for a long time. The word itself comes from the Latin word cultus, which means worship. In ancient times, the term was used to describe a highly localized religious practice. In ancient Greece, there were hero cults. These cults built and maintained shrines to various Greek heroes and performed both sacrifices and libations in order to win the dead hero's favor. Various imperial cults existed across the ancient world. These cults worshipped the nation's leader as a divine figure, though in general, this was not done until after the leader died. The most notable examples are the cults that formed around the Roman emperors. Participation in this cult was a civic duty because the ancient Romans believed the well-being of the state was tied in with the veneration of both the gods and emperors. Failure to participate in these rituals was reprehensible because it put the survival of the empire at stake. This is one of the reasons why early Christians faced persecution. They often refused to participate in these rituals and thus were seen as traitors to Rome. Similar cults devoted to deceased rulers existed in Japan, China, Egypt, and some parts of South America. New religions are often called cults as well, at least until they gain a large following or acceptance within society. Even if the religion in question gains widespread acceptance, it can still be labeled as a cult. Scientology and Mormonism are examples of two religions that are often compared to cults for a variety of reasons. There are many reasons why a new religion might form. Sometimes, new religions form when members from an existing faith break away from a larger religious group. This might occur because members of the breakaway group view their previous religion as corrupt, too strict, or even not strict enough. This splintering played a major role in the development of Christianity. Over the years, the Christian religion broke into a variety of different branches, often over disagreements with how the church was operating. A good example is Martin Luther's 95 Theses, in which he criticized several practices and beliefs of the Catholic Church of his day. Today, many of these branches of Christianity are viewed as legitimate religions, though there are still smaller denominations that are not widely accepted. There are also doomsday cults. These groups believe that the end of the world is imminent and often react by separating themselves from society. In some cases, the separation involves setting up communities in isolated locations in an attempt to live off the land and avoid the chaos and disruption that would likely impact urban areas. One example of this type of cult is the Church Universal and Triumphant. This group was formed by a woman named Elizabeth Clare Prophet. It combines aspects of Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism with various New Age and occult beliefs. She prophesied that there would be a nuclear holocaust in March of 1990 and moved her base of operations to Montana. The church built a ranch and began stockpiling weapons, fuel, and other supplies. Obviously, her prediction was wrong, and the church changed its messaging soon after. Prophet died in 2019, but the organization is still around, though its numbers are nowhere near what they were in the 80s and 90s. Sadly, not all doomsday cults are nonviolent. There are many examples of violent groups, and some of these cults are well known, such as the Manson family, the People's Temple, and the Branch Davidians. Others are less known outside their home country. One such example is a Japanese cult known as Aum Shinrikyo. This cult was formed by a man named Shoko Asahara in 1987. His cult drew inspiration from Buddhism, Hinduism, and biblical prophecies. Shoko believed that World War III would begin in either 2000 or 2006. He predicted the United States would attack Japan with particle beam weapons. His followers believed that anyone outside of their religion was destined to go to hell. However, if a member of Aum Shinrikyo were to murder a non-believer, then the non-believer would be spared the fate of going to hell. The most notorious act of the cult was the Tokyo subway attack in March of 1995. Members of the cult released a chemical similar to sarin gas on 5 subway trains. 13 people died and dozens more were injured as a result of the attack. The cult committed several more attacks over the years, but eventually Shoko and some of his cult members were executed for their crimes. It is interesting to note that, while leaders of many doomsday cults have, to put it kindly, an unimpressive track record when it comes to predicting the end of the world, they often manage to retain some followers and keep trying. Such was the case of Christian radio personality Harold Camping. This talk show host gained nationwide notoriety in 2005 when he predicted the return of Christ on May 21st, 2011. His organization, Family Radio, spent millions of dollars on billboards and other forms of advertising. According to reports, he had followers who sold off everything they owned and gave the money to Camping's ministry to pay for more advertising. When May 21st came and went, he claimed that the world had only been through a spiritual judgment, and the real judgment would occur on October 21st. Camping stayed out of the public eye following his failed prophecy and wouldn't publicly admit his mistakes until March of 2012. Camping died in December of 2013, and while his family radio organization is still in business, they have tried to distance themselves from Camping's teachings. Another type of organization that tends to be lumped in with cults are UFO religions. These groups place extraterrestrials at the center of their religious practice. A common belief in these religions is that extraterrestrials were responsible for the development or even the creation of humanity. Some practitioners of UFO religions believe that aliens visiting Earth in the past were mistaken for gods and taught early humans how to hunt, forge tools, and survive. Other practitioners believe ancient aliens mated with early humans. Another common belief among UFO religions is that extraterrestrials seek to enlighten the human race and lead us into a new age of peace and prosperity. Perhaps one of the most notorious UFO religions was Heaven's Gate. This group was formed in the 1970s by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They believed that they could help their followers enter a higher plane of existence called the next level by rejecting human desires. Members of this group lived a monastic life, though they did eventually start a web design company called Higher Source to earn money for the group. Several male members of the group even went through voluntary castration as a way to help overcome worldly desires. According to the group's beliefs, the Bible was actually a record of human interactions with extraterrestrials. Benjamin Zeller wrote the following in his 2014 book, Heaven's Gate, America's UFO Religion. Members of the Heaven's Gate believed that evil space aliens, Luciferians, falsely represented themselves to Earthlings as God and conspired to keep humans from developing. As technologically advanced humanoids, these aliens have spacecraft, space-time travel, telepathy, and increased longevity. They use holograms to fake miracles. They are carnal beings with gender, and they stopped training to achieve the kingdom of God thousands of years ago. Heaven's Gate believed that all existing religions on Earth had been corrupted by these aliens. For the most part, this cult flew under the radar of national attention, at least until 1997. On March 26th, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department entered the home where the members of the cult lived and discovered that 39 members had committed suicide. Each member wore a black shirt, black sweatpants, black and white Nike athletic shoes, and an armband that read, Heaven's Gate Away Team. Each member had a $5 bill and 3 quarters in their pocket. Cause of death was a combination of drug overdose and asphyxiation due to a plastic bag around the head. Cult members believed that a UFO was following Comet Hale-Bopp, and they would be picked up after their souls left their bodies. As we can see, there are many different types of cults, each with different goals and motivations. But how can we determine what is and what is not a cult? One test we can use is the BITE, or BITE model. This model was developed by mental health professional Dr. Steven Hassan. He is a former member of the Unification Church, also known as the Moonies. Its leader, Sun Myung Moon, believed himself to be the second coming of Jesus. His church was criticized for aggressive recruitment tactics and exploiting their followers to finance the church's various business and political activities. Hassan left the cult in 1976 after surviving a near-fatal car accident. He would go on to write several books and articles about cults and how to help people break free from their control. He studied the methods cults and authoritarian groups use to recruit and manipulate members. The result is the BITE model. The following information comes from the website wasmormon.org. B stands for behavior control. Cults often exert control over members' behavior through strict rules, regulations, and expectations. This may include dictating how members dress, eat, sleep, work, and interact with others. Cults may also employ tactics such as sleep deprivation, isolation from friends and family, and punishment for disobedience to maintain control over members' actions. I stands for information control. Cults typically control the flow of information to their members, restricting access to outside sources of information and promoting only the teachings and materials approved by the group's leaders. This can involve censorship, propaganda, and distortion or revision of historical facts to fit the cult's narrative. Members are often discouraged from questioning or critically examining the beliefs of the group. T stands for thought control. Cults employ techniques to manipulate and regulate members' thoughts and beliefs, often through indoctrination, thought-stopping techniques, and the suppression of dissenting opinions. Members may be discouraged from questioning the teachings of the group or expressing doubt, and critical thinking may be discouraged or labeled as sinful or dangerous. E stands for emotion control. Cults use various tactics to manipulate and exploit members' emotions, often fostering dependency, fear, guilt, and shame to maintain control. This can involve love bombing, the excessive display of affection and approval, threats of punishment or ostracism for disobedience, and the manipulation of emotions through ritual, group dynamics, and charismatic leadership. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, these things sound like they could describe most mainstream religions. That's a fair statement to make. After all, most religions do have a list of thou shalt nots and guidelines for what is considered moral behavior. Most religions also place some restrictions on how their members can dress and what foods they may consume. For example, Catholics aren't supposed to eat meat during Lent. Orthodox Jewish men have restrictions on shaving their beards and cutting their hair. Many Hindus and Buddhists are vegetarian. Pentecostal women aren't allowed to wear pants or cut their hair. And Muslims are not allowed to drink alcohol. I want to stress that I do not think any of the aforementioned religions are cults, but sometimes the line between a cult and a religion can be, let's just say, a bit fuzzy. According to one YouTube video I watched a few years ago, when I was looking into early Christianity and its relationship with the Roman Empire, the only difference between a cult and a religion is time and social acceptance. On a lighthearted note, an article I read around the time of the Heaven's Gate mass suicide jokingly referred to as a cult as any religion more bizarre than your own. Fortunately, though, there are other ways to identify a potential cult. One characteristic used to identify a potential cult is their recruiting tactics. According to an article on the Psychology Today website called Understanding Cults, The Basics, a cult will often look for people in an emotionally vulnerable state. People at risk include those dealing with substance abuse, mental health issues, or a tragic situation like the death of a spouse. A person working through trauma might be searching for spiritual answers, which the cult claims they can provide. The cult might also provide the emotional support that the victim is not receiving from family or friends. A cult might also try to target those who are socially isolated. A person who is alone might be desperately seeking a community to belong to, but having no luck for any number of reasons. A cult might step in to try to fill that role and give the victim a sense of belonging that they so desperately want. Once a lone individual has joined a cult, the group might seek to further isolate the new member by requiring them to cut ties with friends and family members. People who are prone to believing in conspiracy theories are at risk for being drawn into a cult. Cults will often seek to gain new members by claiming that they possess some form of hidden knowledge, or that they know the true nature of the world. There is always an other, a mysterious figure hiding in the shadows who is pulling the strings of the government and those in power. This sort of thinking appeals to those who follow conspiracy theories. Both cult members and conspiracy theorists only need to believe in the threat without actually having to provide any tangible evidence to support their claim. Here is where we start to take a bit of a darker turn. Abuse is also a common characteristic of cults. This can take the form of emotional, financial, physical, or sexual abuse. In some cases, female cult members might be forbidden from working or be required to turn over any money they make to their husband. This is dangerous because it makes her financially dependent on her husband and can make it harder for her to leave if the relationship goes bad. Another risk female cult members face is being forced into arranged marriages. Such is the case of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This group practices polygamy, with some reports indicating that girls as young as 12 were forced to marry adult men. The FBI became involved, and over the years, several men involved in this church have been arrested for crimes against children. Young women are not the only ones to suffer at the hands of this cult. Mormon fundamentalism created a group known as the Lost Boys. These are males, some as young as 13, who have been excommunicated from their communities. Church elders often claim these boys were kicked out for committing such grievous sins like listening to rock music or watching television. Many of the Lost Boys suspect the real reason was more nefarious. The Fundamentalist Church preached that in order for a man to achieve salvation, he must have at least 3 wives. This led to a problem in some communities: too many men and not enough women. Since the elders had the power and influence in their communities, they excommunicated many young men to reduce competition for future wives. Sadly, many of the Lost Boys grew up being told that they were to be mistrustful of the world outside of their community. These young men often enter the outside world with very little education and no job training, and as a result, many end up dealing with homelessness or incarceration. At the time of this recording, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is still active, and the group's cult leader, Warren Jeffs, is serving a life sentence. The church still believes Jeffs to be a prophet and that he has done nothing wrong. This is the power a leader can have over his cult. Members might be subject to financial abuse by being required to give large amounts of money to the cult through tithing or being required to pay for classes and workshops. This is one of the reasons Scientology is often compared to a cult. Members of this religion are expected to go through a process called auditing in order to reach higher levels of spiritual awareness. An article on Business Insider called How Scientology Costs Members Up to Millions of Dollars details some of these costs. The article references a documentary by actress and former Scientologist Leah Remini called Scientology and the Aftermath. According to the article, the auditing process costs $800 an hour, and each session can go for at least 2 hours. Remini also revealed that members of the church are required to purchase all of founder L. Ron Hubbard's books, as well as CDs of his lectures. And, when the book gets updated, members are expected to buy a new copy. Remini estimates that she spent millions of dollars on Scientology during her 35-year involvement with the religion. Perhaps the most telling sign of a cult is the leader. Cult leaders are often charismatic individuals who show signs of narcissism and delusions of grandeur. In the eyes of the cult members, the leader is never wrong, holds absolute authority, and must never be questioned. A cult leader cannot and will not tolerate criticism or dissent. Critical thinking is the bane of the cult leader, for it interferes with the blind obedience they so dearly crave. A cult leader will often try to create an us versus them narrative that pits the cult as being in conflict with a corrupt and sinful world. Those who are not with them are against them. They, the cult, are the ones who know what is really going on. And according to the cult's leader, he is the only one capable of protecting the group, and he is the only one who can fix the world's problems. Cult leaders are notorious for their lack of empathy. The leader is likely to see his followers as little more than a means to an end. The leader rarely cares about any harm he causes to other people, be they members of the cult or members of society as a whole. This lack of empathy makes it easier for the leader to abuse and exploit those under him. But no matter what harm they cause to their members, the leader will insist it is for their own good, whether it is for security, spiritual enlightenment, or as atonement for their transgressions. So great is the hold that his followers will not question the leader's motives, even as they endure hardship, financial difficulty, loss of freedom, and even physical pain or discomfort. To sum it up, a cult is all about control and power dynamics. A key aspect to identify a cult is a leader with absolute authority who must never be criticized or questioned no matter the circumstance. Remember, in a cult, blind obedience is always favored over critical thinking. Those who ask too many questions are a potential danger to the leader's grip on his followers, and thus a danger to his power and control. So what should you do if someone you know has fallen into a cult and you notice it is harming their relationships or quality of life? Your best bet is to seek the help of a mental health professional who specializes in cult deprogramming. However, there are things you can do to help your friend or family member get on the road to recovery. Dr. Steven Hassan wrote an article called The Definitive Guide to Helping People Trapped in a Cult for Psychology Today. He has 10 pieces of advice that you can use when talking to a friend or family member who you suspect is involved in a cult. 1. Ask thought-provoking questions while remaining warm and curious. 2. Keep conversations positive, productive, and civil. 3. Adopt a general tone of curiosity and interest in their positions. 4. Try to connect them with their authentic identity before these extreme beliefs. 5. Don't tell them anything. They need to make certain discoveries on their own. 6. Try to get them to look at reality from many different perspectives. 7. Teach them about indoctrination and mind control. This can be tricky, so it is important to use examples which the cult member will have no emotional attachment to. 8. Use examples of cult leaders with similar qualities. 9. Share feelings and perceptions, not judgments. 10. Ask a question and wait for them to think and respond. He also stresses that it is important to not use too many facts, especially ones that might come off as attacking the cult leader or their doctrine. He ends the article with the following piece of advice. Be patient. This is a journey and will not happen overnight. Do not get discouraged. People do leave. You have been listening to a presentation of Point of Insanity Game Studio. Visit us on the web at www.poigamestudio.com. Follow me on most social media sites at POI Game Studio, and check out my music channel on YouTube at Al Seeger Music.